UFC Fight Night, Blanchfield versus Fiorot, full card predictions. Starting from the bottom of the card, making my way to the top, as always. First fight of the night, we have Angel Pacheco taking on Cowan Loughran. I'm going with Cowan Loughran here. I don't really think super highly of Angel Pacheco at all. I don't think he's that great. He's 32 years old, making his debut in the UFC. I know he had a competitive fight against Danny Silva, so some of the consensus is, he had a really close fight with Danny Silva. Callan Loughran got beat by Lapis, but it's like Taylor Lapis is a good striker. He's a good fighter. He had a competitive fight against Farid Basharat. Lapis did. So I don't think you can hold that loss really against Callan Loughran that much. Plus, that was in Paris, France. He was making his debut in a hostile crowd against the Frenchman in his home country. So I mean, regardless, he lost the fight, but it wasn't like he completely got dominated. He had moments. He lost 29-28. On the side of Pacheco, though, you look through his record, he hasn't really fought a lot of great competition. He really hasn't. Danny Silva was the best guy he's fought, and he lost to him. And Danny Silva gave him the type of fight he wanted, probably the type of fight where Pacheco could have had success. I don't think Loughran's going to give him that kind of fight. One thing I actually found interesting, I watch a few people on YouTube and kind of like look at kind of how they view each fight. I was watching Half the Battle with Dan Levy, and he brought on a guest, and the guest was Nate Williams. Nate Williams actually fought against Angel Pacheco, so I was kind of interested to hear what Nate had to say about Angel. And Nate had to say that he thought Angel would lose this fight because he doesn't have very good takedown defense. He said if you touch the guy's legs, he falls over. I didn't like to hear that. And he said his striking, he doesn't really have a lot of power. Like whenever Nate Williams, like Nate said, whenever he got hit by Angel, he can't really crack that hard. So hearing that, it's like the guy doesn't have good takedown defense in his mind and can't really crack that hard. I know that's a former opponent saying that, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. But I do think Loughran probably can get takedowns. If Loughran can get, he did have a little, not like a ton of control, but he did get to the back of Lapis. If he can get some control against a guy like Lapis, who's I think a lot better than Pacheco, I do think Loughran could have success grappling here and even in the striking. I think his striking's better and his grappling definitely is better. So I'm going with Callan Loughran. I think he deserves to be a pretty heavy favorite. Minus 375. I know some people are taking the shot on the underdog Pacheco. Don't really see it happening. I think Loughran gets this one done. He's also much younger, 27 to 32. Got the age edge as well. So I'm going with Callan Loughran to open up the card. Next fight we have is Andre Petroski taking on Jacob Malkoun. Um, Look, I know what the concern is about Petroski. I'm still going to pick him, honestly. I'm going to pick Petroski to win this fight, but there is a real concern if he gases out against Malkoun. Realistically, the main reason I'm making this pick is because I think the line is just a little bit too wide. Minus 250 on Malkoun. It's like the guy doesn't have really knockout equity. He doesn't really have sub equity either, in my opinion, because Petroski is the better grappler. And when I say I mean pure grappler. Now, obviously, if Petroski gets gassed out, if he gets tired and he can't, and if he slows down massively in rounds 2 and 3, sure, Malkoun could take him down and win. He could win rounds 2 and 3 and it is possible. So I'm not saying it's impossible for Malkoun to just out wrestle Petroski in the later rounds when Petroski gets tired. But early, I heavily favor Petroski early. I think he's got the power edge. And the overall striking, I think, probably favors Petroski. Petroski's also a college wrestler with the fact that he's a jiu-jitsu black belt. So black belt, college wrestler, tough stylistic matchup for Petroski just in the fact that Malkoun will push a pace. But if Petroski can stuff the takedowns here or even get on top, I think he can do work here against Malkoun. I just don't think the line should be against a 7-3 Malkoun. I just think the line's a little bit too wide. Him being a minus 250 here, like I said, it's just I don't think it's accurate. He's coming in from Australia. He's coming to Atlantic City. That flight I'm sure all of you guys know how far that's a long travel time. That's he's going from Australia to Atlantic City. You know what I mean? It's not even like he's just going to Vegas. Like he's going even further. He's going to Atlantic City. This is This is a long, long flight, a long trip for Malkoun. This is basically Petrosky's backyard. He's training in Philly with those guys like Brady, Sabatini, Wells, like Nursultan Ruzaboyev, who's also on this card. He's training with a lot of guys like that, and it's like, this is Atlantic City is basically a home fight for him. You know what I mean? It's one of the closest, locations that he could be fighting in. So for Petrosky, basically he's fighting in his backyard. And I don't think Malkoun, like I said, I just don't think he should be this big of a favorite. I don't think he has a ton of knockout power. I don't. He hasn't shown an ability at least to knock a ton of people out. He has two on his record. He has no submissions. So if he's going to win this fight, he's just going to have to outpace Petrosky and just beat him with the wrestling in rounds 2 and 3. I think that's going to be easier said than done. Petrosky's fought a good level of competition himself. Now you could say the same about Malkoun. He was beating Cody Brundage until the illegal back of the head shot. Terrible look there. I mean, all he had to do was just not hit him in the back of the head, and he wins that fight. So poor IQ. Another reason that it could be difficult to trust. Nick Maximov. He did beat Nick Maximov, out wrestled him, but Petrosky submitted. He choked out Maximov in a minute. So it's like that's a common opponent they have. And Brendan Allen. Malkoun had a lot of moments against Brendan Allen. That was a pretty good performance from him. Brendan Allen's a really good fighter, but as I mentioned, Petrosky, he's a guy that has the wrestling background. He has a black belt in jiu-jitsu. If he just gets controlled here for 3 rounds or 2 rounds, then I'll give it to Malkoun. But I think Petrosky's going to make it a lot tougher than that. I'll pick Petrosky as an underdog in this one. Moving right along, we have Melissa Gatto and Victoria Dudakova. I don't love this fight, really. I'm not super impressed with Dudakova. I'm picking Gatto. I'm just not impressed with Dudakova. I think most people are picking Dudakova as an underdog. I just don't. I don't see anything in her game that really impresses me. The last fight against Jinyu Frey, I know she had staff in that fight, but like, it's Jinyu Frey. She's 38. Like, it's not that. Even if she didn't have staff, it wouldn't have been a great win. I mean, it's 11-9 Jinyu Frey. Before that, she fought Estela Nunes, who hurt her arm immediately into the fight. So that doesn't even really, in my book, that doesn't even really count as a win when someone gets injured in the first like 30 seconds. And then she beat Maria Silva on the Contender Series, and she was on her back for, I believe it was the second round of that fight. She lost a round of that fight. Definitely lost it. Well, she won the fight, but she definitely lost a round of that fight. So all in all, you have Dudakova, who I don't think, sure, she might be able to wrestle, but the thing with Gatto is Gatto does have pretty good jiu-jitsu off her back. And I know I hate when fighters are okay with being on their back, but we've seen it with Dudakova as well. So if you're going to say, oh, Gatto doesn't mind being off her back, well, you could say the same about Dudakova because she has shown that also. And on the fact, on the side of Gatto as well, you look at her opponents, she's fought the much better competition. There's no debate, zero debate who's fought the better competition. It's clearly Gatto. Her last two opponents alone, Ariane Lipsky and Tracy Cortez, are better than anyone that Dudakova's ever fought by a good margin. And she kept those fights competitive. I mean, Ariane Lipsky, she outstruck her on the numbers. Based on the stats, she should have beaten Lipsky. On the stats, she outstruck her every round. Now, it was a close fight, obviously, but just looking at the pure significant strike numbers, she was ahead. And then if you look at the fight against Tracy Cortez, Cortez got her down a few times, but she was threatening with submissions. Now, obviously, she didn't get any because she lost the fight, but she did get to the back of Cortez. She did take down Cortez a few times, and she showed that she also has pretty good striking. In round two, she was showing. I actually liked her how her striking looked in the second round of that Cortez fight. She hit her a few times really, really good, and then made Tracy want to try to take her down because she didn't want to stand up with Gatto. So yeah, I like Gatto here. Minus 155. At the end of the day, it's a lower level women's fight, so it's very hard to like trust in a favorite. But I do think Gatto's fought the better competition. I think she's the better grappler, and even in the striking, I think she's shown more, just more in general of her game that makes me kind of have to pick her. So I'll pick Gatto to get that one done. Ibo Aslan versus Anton Turkali is the next one. it really comes down to either Ebo finds a round one knockout where he probably loses to Anton over the course of either maybe second or third round submission, or Anton gets him down and finishes him. That's really the only two outcomes I see happening. I don't see I don't see Ebo being able to win a decision here. Every single fight that he's been in, if you look at his record, he's never been the distance. So he has all 12 wins coming by way of knockout, no submissions, and he's never been the distance. So if the fight gets past round one, you have to favor Anton. If the fight gets past if the fight gets into round two and three, I think it's for sure Anton's going to start to take over. Now, obviously, Aslan has the power to knock out Anton. Anton is off of three losses now. Got submitted by Gelton Almeida, lost to Vitor Petrino by decision, and then lost to Tyson Pedro. Got knocked out there brutally. That was a bad knockout. And that was, 6 months ago? So he took a little bit of time off. He's back in there. It is worrying. It's super worrying on the Anton side, because it's like he could get chinned right away, and then this could just look stupid for me. But I don't hate I'm going to pick Anton, because I can't just pick a guy who's not the better overall fighter. You know what I mean? Aslan has he has one way to win this fight, and it's by round one knockout. Anton has multiple ways to win this fight. Anton can win this fight by decision. He can win this fight by TKO in the later rounds. He can win this fight by submission. Anton is the better overall fighter. Now, does he have the better chin? Probably no. I mean, he probably has a chin that could get cracked. Definitely, it's been cracked before. It could get cracked again. So if Anton gets knocked out here, would I be surprised? Absolutely not. So I just want to let that be known. Anton could get knocked out in round one, but if he doesn't get knocked out in round one, he probably wins this fight. He already beat Aslan. This is a rematch. He already beat him in the last fight. Now that was 3.5 years ago. Both guys were very young in their careers, and the Anton, he didn't look very good in that. To start off that fight. And Ebo Aslan was trying to put him out of there, trying to get him out of there early, try to knock him out. And I wonder why the UFC is doing this rematch. I think they want Ebo Aslan to kind of rewrite that the last fight and get a round one knockout. But as I said, Anton's fighting for his job here. This is do or die for Anton. You lose this fight, you're out of the UFC. And I just feel like he's also been fighting the much better competition. You look at Ebo, Paulo Renato Jr. I know his record's 12-2, but if you really look into that, record, it's kind of a fraud record. Paulo Renato Jr. Just look through it, 12-3 now, but look through his record, right? He's beaten guys with negative records his entire career, so that win I don't really take much stock into that win, because Paulo's been fighting bums. And then besides that, 5-9, 18-21, 6-7, you're fighting scrubs. So you're fighting scrubs while Anton's actually fighting real opponents, very good opponents. Gelton Almeida, Vitor, and Tyson Pedro. Say what you want about Pedro, but those three opponents are way, way, way better than anyone Ebo's fought by a long shot. And yeah, I can't bank on a guy who has one way to win, so I'm picking Anton. If he gets knocked out, he gets knocked out, but I got to pick him here. Next prelim is Connor Matthews and Dennis Bazooka. This is another one. I don't understand the line on this fight. I don't. I think Dennis Bazooka is a better fighter than Connor Matthews. I think he's the better fighter. He has more experience. He's younger. He's fought the better competition. He's 26 years old, about to be 31, about to be 32-year-old Matthews. Matthews is 7-1. If you look at his wins, he beat Jay Ellis. He beat Jay Ellis 2.5 years ago. If you're fighting Jay Ellis, it just means you don't have a lot of confidence in your skill set to actually fight real opponents. So he beat Jay Ellis, and you could say the same. Listen, Dennis Bazooka, pre-UFC, Bazooka wasn't fighting amazing competition either, but you look at Matthews, right? He loses to Francis Marshall in the Contender Series, and he got his ass beat. I rewatched that fight. He got beat up. He did. He got beat up. He got bloodied. He lost the fight clearly. It wasn't like it was super close. He was in there, but he lost. He lost to Francis Marshall, who was 21 or 22 at the time, I believe. Maybe 23, but still, young guy at the time. Francis Marshall, only 5-0, got beat up by him. And then his last two fights, he beat Jair Farias on the Contender Series and then Andrew Cruz. Those are his last two wins. I just think Bazooka's been fighting a much better strength of competition. I think if Francis Marshall can light up Connor Matthews on the feet. I think Bazooka probably could have similar success. I think Bazooka is actually a solid fighter. I think he's down to scrap. I think he's pretty. I understand he got knocked out by Jamal Emmers, but I do think he's pretty durable in the grand scheme of things. I don't see Matthews knocking him out here. I think he will be game enough to go for 3 rounds against Matthews, if not knock him out. So I do like Dennis Bazooka to win. People are writing him off because he lost to Sean Woodson and Jamal Emmers. Sean Woodson and Jamal Emmers are good fighters. Jamal Emmers is on this card. He's a very good fighter. And Sean Woodson is a very tricky striker. So no shame in those losses at all. The Francis Marshall fight, I think, is actually, I think Marshall's worse than both Sean Woodson and Emmers. So yeah, I feel like people are looking too much into that knockout loss that Bazooka had. I know he got knocked out, Emmers, but again, Emmers is really good. So yeah, I'm going, and plus Dennis Bazooka, Longo and Weidman guy. This is more of a hometown fight for him. From Staten Island, his family is probably going to be in the crowd in Atlantic City. I'm going to mention that a few times. Obviously, this is a live card. This is in Atlantic City. So if there's a guy from New Jersey or from New York or from like PA, if there's a local guy, I'll let that be known. And I think definitely that'll help Dennis in this fight. So I'm taking Dennis Bazooka. Um, I think the line, if I'm not mistaken, it was an even line, right? About minus 115 to minus 105. Don't understand it. I think Bazooka should be a slightly bigger favorite than that. But nonetheless, Julio Arce is taking on Herbert Burns in the next one. Yeah, I got to go Arce here. Arce is a minus 400 favorite for a reason. Herbert Burns, his last fight was just awful. Just an awful look against Bill Algeo. Algeo, now he did have Algeo in a triangle, and that was like, it was dangerous for Algeo. Another guy, it's kind of funny. Algeo is another guy on this card. It seems like a lot of the previous fighters I've been looking at have opponents on this card. Herbert Burns is one of them. Bill Algeo is fighting it on the main card, but for this fight, Herbert Burns lost to Bill Algeo in his last one. That was about a year and a half ago, year and 8 months ago. He looked terrible, looked absolutely terrible against Algeo. He pretty much gave up. He gave up. The ref told him to stand up. Bill Algeo was like, all right, get up. He didn't get up. He just let himself lose. And I couldn't believe what I was watching. I've never seen someone well, not never, but I don't often see guys just quit. Sometimes you see guys, they're so tired, they'll give their back, they'll tap, or they'll tap right away, or you know what I mean, or they'll cover up, and But I very rarely see a guy just stay down and let himself lose like that. You know what I mean? It's like he couldn't even will himself to stand up. So if you can't will yourself to stand up, not even like continue like scrapping, like just stand up, and he couldn't even do it. The ref told him to get up, and he stayed down, and it was exhaustion from damage. He was so tired he gave up. I'm not picking him to win in any fight moving forward. I don't care unless he fights someone with zero grappling. Unless Herbert Burns fights a white belt, I'm not picking him to win another UFC fight. And Julio Arce is not a white belt. Julio Arce is not going to give up, I don't think, like Herbert Burns has shown. The last fight, Daniel Pineda, another one. Burns, I feel like Burns is one of those guys. He has an early opportunity to submit you. He definitely is live early. He can shoot takedowns early and try to get you down and out grapple you, get to a dominant position, submit you. He has the early factor of the danger factor, I should say. But outside of that early submission, he's probably not going to win. And against Julio Arce's fought a very good level of competition, especially in his last five. Hakeem Dawodu lost a split, beat Andre Ewell, lost to Song Yadong, who's obviously a top 10 bantamweight at this point, and then beat Daniel Santos, lost to Montel Jackson. Now, obviously, Julio Arce is taking this at featherweight. He did also miss weight for this fight. He missed weight by 1 pound. So there are a few factors that you can look into and say, oh, he missed weight. There's this and that. You can say what you will about all that stuff, but at the end of the day, Arce, New Jersey guy, taking on a guy that is basically pure jiu-jitsu. I don't rate Herbert Burns striking very highly, to be honest. Not that his striking is like the worst I've ever seen, but he's really just a jiu-jitsu guy for the most part. Doesn't mind being on his staying on his back. I think Arce, if he minds his P's and Q's, he wins this fight. I think this is a tee-up fight for Arce because he fought Montel Jackson, a very tough opponent in his last one. So Give me Julio Arce to win this in his home state of New Jersey as well. Another one we have here is Virna Jandiroba versus Lupi Godinez. I believe this is the headliner. No, it isn't. It is the second to headliner of the prelims. Virna and Lupi. I was originally thinking of picking Virna just because, like, I don't think the line is accurate. I think Lupi is a little bit too heavy of a favorite here. I don't think she should be this much of a favorite against Virna. Virna's actually pretty good at grappling, at least. I don't rate her striking very highly. In fact, I think Virna's striking is bad, but her wrestling, I don't. I mean, I've seen her take girls down before. She took down Marina Rodriguez a few times, took down Angela Hill, beat Angela Hill. Her losses are to actually other grapplers. If you look at it, Amanda Ribas she lost to, Mackenzie Dern and Carla Esparza are her three losses on her entire record. Outside of that, she's beating everyone. Now we have Lupi on the other side, who Lupi obviously training with Diego Lopez, training with Alexa Grasso and that team. So that's a good team to be training with. Obviously, that camp has done very well recently. I do think Diego Lopez probably will win on UFC 300 against Sadiq Youssef. And I think the train keeps on rolling here. I will go with Lupi, not confidently. I think Lupi, this could be a really close fight. Just if Virna does get some takedowns, I don't see Virna submitting Lupi though. I think Lupi will be smart enough to stay out of any danger on the mat. I think she knows her win condition or the path to victory is to just stay on the feet, stuff the takedowns, and win using her striking. And I feel like she can do that. I feel like she's a better striker, and she's been improving. Every fight, she's been improving. I think Lupi, and she does have some bad losses earlier in her career. I mean, I know she lost to Angela Hill a year and 7 months ago, and you look further, she lost to Luana Carolina like 3 years ago. So she has some pretty bad losses on her record, but all in all, I think Lupi is a pretty solid fighter. I do think she can outpoint Virna on the feet. Plus, I think she's just got much better not just technical striking, but also more danger, more power on the feet as well. So I like Lupi. If she decides she wants to like try to test her grappling or wrestling, then obviously that would be dumb. I think she should just focus on stuffing the takedowns of Virna, keeping the fight on the feet, and outstriking her and winning comfortably on the feet. So I think that's what will happen or what should happen for Lupi. I'll take her to win. But you never know. Like I said, with Virna, you never know because Virna has, found ways to win before, found ways to get the fight to the mat, and she is a dangerous grappler. But I will still lean with Lupi. Now we have the headliner of the prelims. It is Jamal Emmers versus Nate the Train, Nate Landwehr. Ah, I, I'm gonna go with Emmers. I'm gonna go with Emmers just because he's the better fighter. He's a better fighter, so I'm gonna pick the better fighter to win. But that doesn't mean Nate doesn't have a shot. I mean, Nate certainly has a shot. Nate Landwehr's the type of guy that he wins based off of, in the David Onama fight. Onama was beating the brakes off of him until he got tired, and Nate Landwehr came back and nearly finished him and could have had him out of there, I believe, on multiple occasions. He was very close to finishing that fight against David Onama. And Nate Landwehr's just that type of guy. He's the type of guy where you better not get tired against him because he can go 3 hard rounds and he really is dangerous. If you give him the opportunity to climb back into the fight, he can burn you. You know what I mean? He can burn you. And we saw in the fight against Onama that exact, what exactly happened there. Now, in the fight against Emmers, in this fight, I just think Emmers is too technical. He's just too well-rounded for Nate Landwehr to impose his game. Now, could Nate Landwehr just do what he does, and just will himself to victory? I mean, you never know. I mean, it's MMA, it's fighting. You never know what's going to happen. You never know if someone can just, flip the switch in round 3 and pour it on. Like, you never know what can happen. But watching Jamal Emmers, he's shown that he's actually very good. He beat Dennis Bazooka in a minute, knocked him out. But the fight before that, I thought he won against Jack Jenkins. I picked Jack Jenkins to win that fight. And looking back on it, I was like, Jack Jenkins, I don't think he won that fight. I think Emmers won that. I think Emmers looked solid in that. I mean, it was a competitive fight, close fight, but I do think Emmers should have gotten that win. Um, Hussein Askabov, 23-0 guy. I know uh, people now are calling Askabov a fraud and he sucks and this and that. Emmer still beat him. He beat him. He dominated him. He won every single round clearly. Dominated that fight and looked great in that fight against an undefeated. I don't care, if he's a fraud or not. 23-0, beating a guy like that's impressive for Emmers. Was about, and you look through his record, a lot of the fights he's been in, like he had an opportunity to win. The Jack Jenkins fight, I thought he should have won that one. The Pat Sabatini fight, he was beating Pat Sabatini. He rocked him and dropped him, and then he decided to try to use his grappling. He went for a toe hold. Sabatini went for a heel hook. Obviously, toe holds aren't going to beat a heel hook when your knee's getting ripped apart. So, yeah, Sabatini ripped his knee apart, and he had to he had to tap, but if you look through his record, he also fought Giga Chikadze to a super close split decision. All in all, just Jamal Emmers, he hasn't been able to put the pieces of the puzzle together. He hasn't been able to do that, but I feel like maybe this is the time that he can. He's such a good fighter. It's just he hasn't been able to, like I said, put it all together. I hope he puts it all together here. I hope this is actually a really fun fight. I know it will be because every Nate Landwehr fight's very fun to watch, very interesting. Um, and like I said, because of who he is, because of his no quit attitude, he always has a chance to kind of just keep on bringing the fight, and he always has a way to win. But I just think against a guy like Emmers, I think Emmers has the wrestling to keep it on the feet, and I think Emmers has the better striking. I think he's better technically in the striking. I think he's got good enough wrestling to keep it on the feet, and I think he should be safe all around here, unless he gets like super tired, which I don't see happening. So I'll pick Jamal Emmers in this one. Now we're moving right to the main card. First fight on the main card is Chidi Njokuani versus Reese McKee at 170. So we have Chidi dropping from 185 to 170 to take on Reese McKee. I'm going with I'm going to go with Reese McKee, and that is probably going to shock a lot of people because Reese McKee has not really shown anything in the UFC so far. I don't even know if he's won a UFC fight yet, but the thing I notice with Reese McKee is he's just a guy that if you don't kill him, if you don't put him away in the first round, he's another one of those guys. It's like you better finish him in round one because if you don't, he's gonna probably pour it on in the later rounds. And Chidi Njokuani is a guy who I've seen break before. Reese McKee, if you're gonna break him, you better knock him out. But for Chidi, it's like I've seen against Mikhail Oksachek, he broke in that fight. You know what I mean? He broke to Mikhail. And Reese McKee, I just don't think he is a guy that breaks. I think, if you knock him out, obviously, if you knock him out, you knock him out. If you drop him bad and you knock him out. But if that doesn't happen and he starts pouring it on Chidi in rounds 2 and 3, I could see him finding a finish too. I think Chidi dropping from 185 to 170, I don't like it. He's 35 years old. Dropping a weight class at 35 years old is never a good idea. And I know it's Reese McKee. I know McKee hasn't really shown an ability to win UFC fights. I know this is a step down in competition for Chidi, or so it appears. But I don't know, man. The fight that Reese McKee had against Angelusa was beating the brakes off of him. And round 3, Reese almost finished him. Angelusa was turning around and trying to walk away almost. You know what I mean? He wanted to break. Like he was so tired. He was so gassed out, and Reese was just pouring it on in round 3. And if there was another minute or two of the fight, maybe Reese McKee would have found the finish. And against Chidi, you're dropping 15 extra pounds, right? 15 extra pounds from middleweight to welterweight. You know what I mean? You're 35 years old. You're probably going to have to win this fight in round 1 because if you don't, this is the type of guy that Reese McKee, he's the type of guy that will pour it on. He's the type of guy that will break you if the rounds go on. I'm picking Reese McKee. I feel like it's one of those fights where all he has to do is survive 5 minutes. If he survives 5 minutes, I think he'll be in the driver's seat here. Now, if he doesn't, obviously Chidi has the power. Chidi has the power. Chidi has the explosiveness. Chidi could put the hands on him and finish him in 1 minute. So if Chidi and Njokuani knocks him out in a minute, it is what it is. But if that doesn't happen, I think Reese McKee, as the fight goes on, will start to take over and win. Similar to the prediction I made earlier in the night with Ibo Aslan and Anton Turkalj. So it's a similar fight in my opinion. It's a similar fight to the Anton Turkalj and Anton Turkalj and Ibo Aslan fight. It's either round one for Chidi, round one for Ibo, or later rounds for Anton, later rounds for Reese. I'll take the guys that have the ability to push in the later rounds. Second fight on the main card, I really like this fight. Bill Algeo versus Kyle Nelson. Nelson's good. He is good, but I am going to go with Bill Algeo. Bill Algeo is the thing with Algeo is, first of all, his cardio. He's going to have a cardio edge against Kyle Nelson. I've seen Nelson gas out in fights before. I've seen him get broken in fights before just from being super tired, getting gassed out, trying to, I guess, go all out early and then not being able to pick it up as the rounds go on. Now, he did win his last two fights, both by decision against Blake Builder and Fernando Padilla. And although I do think Blake Builder and Fernando Padilla, I do think those are two solid wins for Nelson. Like, they're not bad wins to have on his record, obviously. They're solid wins, but that was, I believe that was Padilla in his second UFC fight against Nelson. Nelson, the more experienced UFC fighter at that point, beat him. It was a good win for him. The fight before that, Blake Builder, you know, I don't know. I feel like those two guys, they're not on the level of Bill Algeo. Bill Algeo, incredible cardio, good output. I think his output, especially in the later rounds, will be more than Nelson. I think he's got good enough grappling where I don't think this fight will even take place in the grappling, but if it does, I think Algeo does have better grappling than Nelson, especially if Nelson gets tired. You look through Bill Algeo's last 5 fights. Alexander Hernandez, he started pouring it on Alexander Hernandez as the fight went on, beat him pretty clearly. Good win there against a game opponent in Hernandez. Before that, submitted TJ Brown. Lost a split to Andre Fili, who is a tricky matchup. I know Andre Fili just got knocked out by Dan Ige, but Andre Fili, he's a solid fighter. He has some good wins in the UFC. And then obviously we talked about the Herbert Burns fight. We know what happened there. Bill Algeo did what he had to do to win that one. And then he beat Joe Anderson Brito, which that win has aged incredibly well. Joe Anderson Brito is borderline ranked, if not ranked now. So great win for Algeo there. 4-1 in his last 5. The one loss being a split to Andre Fili. Nelson, he's on a 2-fight win streak, but those guys, Padilla and Blake Builder, I don't think they're on the level of Algeo. I think Algeo will win this fight against Nelson. I'll take him to win by decision. Next fight on the main card is Nursultan Ruzaboyev versus Cedrikus Dumas. I don't understand the love I've been seeing. This line was like minus 350, by the way. This line was like minus 350. Now it's down to minus 225. People are betting Dumas. I don't get it. I'm picking Ruzaboyev. I don't get the love on Dumas. He can't grapple. His grappling he's blue belt at best. I can't even say he's better than a blue belt. I think his grappling is pretty poor. I really, really do. He got dominated by Josh Fremd. Dominated. The Josh Fremd fight, he quit in the Josh Fremd fight. You could tell by his body language he wanted out. Just rewatch that fight. I keep seeing people that are picking Dumas and have this belief that Dumas is like underrated. It's like, no, he isn't. He's a bad fighter. I'm not going to change my opinion. I don't think he's very good. I think Dumas is really not a good fighter at all. And if Nursultan can't beat Dumas, he should just get cut. Honestly, that's how low I rate Dumas. You look at Dumas's last few fights. He wins on the Contender Series, wins by guillotine. All right. Then he gets in the UFC. First fight in the UFC, loses to Josh Fremd, gets subbed by him too. Got dominated in round 1, outstruck, taken down as well, outgrappled, and then he got submitted by Josh Fremd. The last 2 fights he had, Cody Brundage, who honestly is probably the lowest IQ fighter in UFC history. Am I wrong for saying that? Can anyone tell me who has worse IQ than Cody Brundage? I don't know anyone that does. Cody Brundage's fight IQ was awful. He was. I'm not gonna even get into the. I'll save the Brundage talk for Bo Nickel on UFC 300. I'll save that. But Cody Brundage is a horrible fighter. Dumas beating him, so what? And then he beats Abu Azaitar, who took like 3 years off. And the guy, clearly, Abu Azaitar took 3 years off. I don't think his head's in the game of MMA. I don't think Azaitar was really taking that completely seriously. I think he was just taking that for a paycheck. And that's different than Ruzaboyev. I think Ruzaboyev wants to be in here. He wants to, win. He really wants to win against Dumas. They're around the same age. It's not like Ruzaboyev's like 35 and Dumas like 24. Like it's not like there's a huge age gap. These guys are almost the same age. Ruzaboyev's fought them, way, way, way more. 33, 8-2 to a 9-1 Dumas. I think he's fought way more. He's got way more experience in the cage. Just knocked out Bruno Ferreira in the first round of their fight. Caught a kick, fired a right straight down the middle, dropped him, knocked him out. And on the side of Dumas, it's just like, how does he win this? I mean, does he outpoint Ruzaboyev for 3 rounds? I don't see that happening. I don't think his striking's that good. And I don't think his grappling's better. In fact, I think Ruzaboyev should have a massive grappling edge here. Yeah, just looking at it, I think so low. And I picked Dumas against Abu Azaitar, by the way. I picked Dumas in that fight against Azaitar because I knew Azaitar was taking the fight for a paycheck. I don't think Nursleton's taking this fight for a paycheck. I think his grappling's way better. Like I said, Dumas, blue belt at best. His grappling sucks. In the fight against Brundage, he got on top of Brundage, but like Brundage is the guy that pulls guillotine all the time. His fight IQ, I'm not gonna even. I keep getting into it. I won't say anything else about Brundage, but yeah, I don't like Dumas at all. I'm taking Ruzaboyev. If he loses this fight, if Ruzaboyev loses to Dumas, just cut him. But I don't think he does. I think he steamrolls Cedricus Dumas. Plus, let me add on another factor about Dumas. Well, didn't he get arrested like a month ago? Didn't Dumas spend like a few days in jail a month ago? It's like the guy's just an idiot. I'm going with Ruzaboyev. Featured fight of the night: Bruno Silva versus Chris Weidman. Man, brutal fight for Weidman. If he can't get the takedowns, that is. And I have to go with Bruno Silva. I have to go with Silva just because I want Weidman to win. I'll say it right away. Like I'll let it be known. I want Weidman to win this fight. If Weidman wins this fight, I'll be happy because having Weidman, someone like Weidman winning, it would just be awesome to see. You know what I mean? It would be awesome to see him take down and submit Bruno Silva, but I just don't see it happening. Now, I know both guys are 1-4 in their last 5. Both guys have not looked good in their recent fights. But let's start with the Silva side. Starting with the Silva side, Sharabullet Magomedov lost to him, took him down a few times, got butchered. Actually, he got butchered while he was on top with elbows, and Magomedov was active off of his back, and in the striking, Magomedov was getting the better of him. So Magomedov won that fight against Bruno Silva. The fight before, 9 months ago, Brendan Allen. He actually rocked Brendan Allen in that one, rocked him bad, and then obviously Brendan Allen dropped him and ended up submitting him. Brendan Allen's a ranked fighter, though, so not too much shame in that. Bruno Silva did beat Brad Tavares. Brad Tavares is known to be pretty durable. He's not known to be a guy who's like doesn't have a chin. So that knockout is a pretty good win for Bruno. And then the last two before that, Alex Pereira, we know how good Pereira is. And then GM3. That GM3 fight was probably one of the worst looks I've seen from Silva. That was just awful. He got club and subbed by GM3. Just a bad look, you know what I mean? Getting club and not getting subbed, but just getting club and subbed, you know what I mean? Getting dropped by GM3, a guy who's not even known for striking at all. Not good for Silva. 1-4 in his last 5. But if you take a look at Weidman, I mean, 5 years ago gets knocked out by Jacare, knocked out by Dominic Reyes, beats Omari Akhmedov, and then his last 2, he had the leg break 3 years ago against Uriah Hall. And, he came back from that injury, took on Brad Tavares, lost a decision to Brad Tavares. That was the reason that was such a tough fight for Chris. One was because Brad Tavares has like 90 something percent takedown defense. Brad Tavares has elite takedown defense, and he's just one of those guys. Brad Tavares, he doesn't get taken down. He's an Extreme Couture product. Extreme Couture middleweights are very good counter wrestlers. Chris Curtis, Sean Strickland, um, Brad Tavares. Who else? Name any Extreme Couture middleweight. Most of them are very good counter wrestlers, are good at defensive wrestling at least. And same can be said of Brad. So no shame in Chris losing that. And that was his first fight back from that injury. So all in all, I think Silva has the all the upside on the feet. Weidman probably has all the upside on the mat. Do you see Weidman getting takedowns? That's really what it comes down to. Do you see Weidman taking down Bruno and possibly submitting him? Because I feel like that's what he has to do. Weidman's going to have to get those takedowns. He's going to have to look to control and submit Bruno Silva. Because on the feet, I think Weidman's probably a sitting duck for someone that hits as hard as Bruno. So I'm going to go with Bruno Silva to win. However, obviously, I'm going to be rooting for Weidman to get those takedowns and win. But the pick's got to be Bruno. Now that brings us to the co-main event of the evening, which is Vicente Luque, the Silent Assassin, versus Joaquin Numanza Buckley. Buckley, Luque, this is a fantastic fight. This is a fantastic fight. It's going to be, I imagine this is going to be playing out on the feet the entire time. I don't see either guy looking for a lot of takedowns or looking to grapple here. I do think Luque is the better grappler, so if it does go to the mat, I would favor Luque. I think he's just got the better overall grappling game. I think he also trains with a lot of really good grapplers, Gilbert Burns, among many others. So I do think Vicente Luque does have the edge in the grappling department, but I don't see Luque shooting takedowns. So the only way I see him even being able to use his grappling is defensively if Joaquin Buckley tries to take him down or tries to, wrestle him. So that's the only way I see Luque using his grappling. But in the striking department, which I think this takes place in, I have to favor Luque. And it's because he's fought the better competition, I think. If you look through Buckley's record, and I think Buckley's very good. Obviously, he had that the spinning back kick or jump spinning back kick against Impa Kasanganay, one of the best knockouts I've ever seen. Also, shout out to Impa. Shout out to Impa Kasanganay, $1 million winner in the PFL. A lot of disrespect that was being shown towards him. I didn't think he would keep. I thought that Johnny Eblen fight. I thought Eblen would run through him. That was a really razor close fight. A lot of people thought he beat Johnny Eblen. So the Impa Kasanganay fight has aged very well for him. Impa has done a lot of good things in his career. But if you look through his record, I mean, Buckley, he hasn't been beating like top 15 level opponents. I mean, Alex Morono, he's not top 15 level. He's good, but he's not top 15. Fiallo's not top 15, like Durai. And after those two, after Morono and Fiallo, it's 185ers all the way down. So he's fighting at 170. Buckley, it's his third fight at 170 in the UFC. And fighting a guy in Luque who I don't think Luque's washed. That's another topic of debate that people have been talking about this week. Oh, Luque's going to lose. He's washed up. I don't think he's washed up. I think it's just a little bit like wrong to say that Luque is sure. Has Luque been in a lot of wars? Yeah, he's been in a lot of wars. He's been in a lot of, a lot of fights, a lot of like, back and forth, slug it out type of fights. He's been in a lot of those fights, but I mean, Joaquin Buckley is the one that's been knocked out 4 times. So if you talk about Luque's chin, well, you got to talk about Joaquin Buckley getting knocked out 4 times. So, that you got to mention that. So the last 5 for Buckley or the last 5 for Luque, we'll talk about that first. For starters, the most recent fight against RDA beat him, utilized a lot of grappling for that fight. Actually, the Jeff Neal fight was what worried everyone. That's the fight that kind of people were looking at like, oh man, because he got whooped on by Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal beat his ass and finished him. You know what I mean? That was I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, Luque is an amazing fighter. I couldn't believe that Jeff Neal put it on him like that. But I think in this fight, I think this is. I don't want to say a step. It's not really a step down because Joaquin Buckley does have the power. He does have the ability to win this fight. but I just think one, he leaves too many openings on the feet. I think Luque is a good enough striker that he can catch Buckley if Buckley does leave his chin up in the air. And Buckley's been knocked out before on multiple occasions. Um, so I think if Luque knocking him out isn't out of the picture, and even in like a 15-minute striking fight overall, I just don't know if Buckley's going to have the ability to just outstrike. I mean, yeah, he beat Morono, he beat Fialo, but like those guys are not the level of Luque. Luque is he's an incredible striker, and I say he's underrated because people, I know Luque in a lot of his fights, he's been the favorite in most of his fights, but like the last two fights, RDA and Buckley, he was like a -110 pick'em. He was a pick'em against RDA, and now he's a pick'em here against Joaquin Buckley. So it's like he's a pick'em in his last two fights. I don't think he's done. If Luque was like 37, 38 years old, slowing down, I would say, all right, maybe, but I don't think he's slowing down yet. He's only 32 years old. He's in his prime. I mean, he's in his prime, just like Buckley at 29. They're both in basically the prime of their careers, around the same age. Luque's fought the much better competition, got in there against Jeff Neal. I know he lost to him, lost to Bilal. He also beat Bilal by knockout a while back. Luque's fought Wonder Boy. He's fought a ton of really good strikers. I don't think Joaquin Buckley is going to give him anything that he hasn't seen before. Obviously, Buckley has really good head kicks. He's got a lot of power. He's going to swing for the fences, but I just think Luque, he has a technical ability. He probably doesn't have the speed and the explosiveness edge, but as Connor said, timing beats speed, precision beats power. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think Luque is just going to be more precise with his punches. I think he's going to be able to hurt Buckley and possibly get him out of there. So my pick is Vicente Luque. Although I do recognize the dangers of Joaquin Buckley, I do think both guys have the ability to knock each other out. So the fight is a pick 'em for a reason. Both guys have knockout power. Both guys are really good strikers. But I'm going to take the guy in Luque who has been fighting at 170 his entire career and has fought the better competition. Last, but certainly not least, we have the main event of the evening, which is Aaron Cold-Blooded Blanchfield versus Manon Fiorot. I'm going with Aaron Blanchfield. I'm going with Blanchfield. I like Aaron Blanchfield because her grappling is incredible in my opinion. I think her grappling, and she's mean. That's what I like the most about Erin Blanchfield. She gets in there and she's mean. She's not one of those fighters that's just gonna point fight you and just try to hit you at range and move around. No, she's gonna get in there and she's gonna fight. She's gonna go in there. She's gonna walk you down. She's gonna try to take you down and beat you up. And look at her last few fights. I mean, Talia Santos. I know she didn't take her down, but she had 8 minutes of cage control against Talia Santos of a 15-minute fight. So Blanchfield showed that she can dig deep. She can dig deep, win when it matters, and that was a tough stylistic fight. Talia Santos is very strong, very physical, and the fact that Aaron Blanchfield was able to control her against the cage for 8 minutes, pretty impressive. I know it was a competitive fight, 29-28, but it was a good win for Aaron. And then the last few before that, obviously she submitted Jessica Andrade, who everyone's saying is washed up now and way past her. It's like whatever. Anything to discredit Blanchfield. Molly McCann beat her, dominated her in round one, made it look easy, made it look like Molly wasn't even. She made Molly look like an amateur, look like a white belt. Beat JJ Aldrich by standing guillotine, and then beat Miranda Maverick, took her down multiple times. A girl in Miranda Maverick who has good wrestling herself, and she took her down and mauled her. So Erin Blanchfield, she has that mauling style of grappling. She's going to try to get Manon Fiorot to the ground. Now, Manon Fiorot, on the other hand, she is good at keeping the fight on the feet. She has like 90, I think around 90% takedown defense or something like that. So her takedown defense is very good. So it's going to be tough for Blanchfield to get her down. But I don't think Blanchfield needs to get her down like 3-4 times to win this fight. I think there's a possibility if Blanchfield gets her down once that she could win this fight. Because if she gets her down, Manon tries to give up her back to get up, Aaron can jump right on it, try to get under the chin, look for a choke there. There's always that possibility for Aaron. I think she is even if Manon Fiorot is the minute winner, I think Blanchfield's probably the moment winner. I don't think Fiorot has a ton of power. I mean, I know she has a finish win over Tabitha Ricci, but besides that, she's just been a decisionator, just been, hitting scorecards every single fight. Point fighter, basically, one of those French point fighters. And by the way, France, a lot of those French point fighters are very good strikers. You know what I mean? I'm not disrespecting their striking skill. They are very good strikers. They do have an ability to obviously beat you on the feet over 5 rounds, but against Erin Blanchfield, just can't trust her. Just can't trust her against Erin Blanchfield to be able to just point fight for 5 rounds. I just don't think that'll work against someone that's just as much of a dog as Blanchfield is, and someone that's going to try to take her down over and over. So I am going to go with Erin Blanchfield. I get why people are picking Fiorot. I get why some people like Fiorot. I mean, she beat Rose Namajunas. Rose did break her hand, I believe, or I think she broke her hand in round one, and Rose did take round three off of her, but still, she beat Rose Namajunas in a striking fight, beat Caitlin Chukagian, Caitlin Sermonara, beat Jennifer Maia, Myra Bueno Silva, and Tabitha Ricci. So good level of competition for both of them. But I also like the age advantage for Blanchfield, 24 years old to 34. I think she's got much more room for improvement. Fiorot is a finished product at this point. What we see is what we get out of Manon Fiorot. For Blanchfield, what we see might not be what we get because we might see another added layer to her game. We might see another new version of Blanchfield. And last thing I'll mention about this, Erin Blanchfield from New Jersey. I know it says New York, but she is from New Jersey, training out of New Jersey. This is at Atlantic City. I mentioned that for multiple fighters. And this is the last one I'll mention it for because Erin Blanchfield, the crowd will be going crazy for her. Every time Blanchfield gets a takedown or lands a punch, the crowd's going to go crazy. And I think that might, add into the fact if the fight does go the distance. So all in all, good card, a lot of interesting fights. UFC Fight Night, Atlantic City, main event of Blanchfield Fiorot should be very entertaining. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.